Hello everyone and welcome into another edition of ONIT's College Basketball Tuesday show. The time has finally come. The brackets are here. The tournament starts today on the men's side, and we'll be looking at all the men's and women's ONIT teams that made the tournament. We had 12 on the men's side and 9 on the women's side. We're going to look at all of them here today. But first, I want to wish you a happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone out there. Hope you're wearing green, and want to let you know to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can do so by hitting the button down below. If you ring the bell, you get notified as well when we post new videos. So if you enjoy college officially licensed trading cards and all the teams that we covered here, you definitely want to hit that subscribe button because we got a lot more fun stuff coming throughout the NCAA tournament and heading on into our spring sport season. We also have gymnastics and wrestling wrapping up here very shortly as well. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and stick around to the end of the video to find out how you and your ONIT cards can be involved in some of our future episodes. Now let's push on and take a look at what is in our Tuesday college basketball box.
What's in the box?
Our Tuesday ONIT college basketball box features the locally sourced but nationally relevant headlines for all of our ONIT tournament teams. As I said, we're looking at 12 men's and 9 women's team here today. What we're going to be doing is we're going to break down each bracket region by region, see what teams we have in each region on the men's and women's side, see their potential matchups when we might see some ONIT versus ONIT games, and then look through the whole bracket to see how these teams could potentially make it to the Final Four or the national championship. We're going to start on the men's side, so let's begin by taking a look at the first of the 4 regions in the men's bracket. Starting in the upper left of the men's bracket, this is the East region. We are going to be doing bracket updates every single Tuesday here, taking a look and previewing the upcoming rounds. So today we are only concerned about the play-in games, the first round and the second round, and then we'll be back next Tuesday to preview those Sweet 16 and Elite 8 matchups. So we are taking a look here at number 2, UConn. 29-5, runners-up in the Big East, both the regular season and the tournament. They are against number 15, Furman, to open their tournament as UConn tries to advance past the first round into the second round, where they could potentially have a matchup against our number 7 seed in this region, which is UCLA. UCLA draws a matchup with UCF. The Bruins had a nice run in the Big Ten tournament. They secured their spot in the NCAA tournament at 23-11, and they get a relatively easy draw, I guess you could say, against UCF. Definitely a team that played very well in the Big 12 this season. The Big 12 had a lot of great teams, as we see a ton of them getting high seeds in this tournament. But UCLA getting a team that they should be able to handle. I think out of all the matchups they could have drawn, this is definitely one of the better 7-10 matchups to have for the Bruins. And if they win this game, they would go into a second round matchup that is more than likely against UConn. So that is a very interesting game that we'll be looking forward to in the second round. As long as UConn doesn't get upset by number 15 seeded Furman and UCLA can pull it out against UCF, we would have an ONIT versus ONIT matchup right there in the second round. And I really think that could go either way. UConn has not necessarily been at the top of their game, I think, recently, especially against kind of elite competition. UCLA can be an elite team. We've seen spurts of that at times. We haven't seen it throughout the whole year, but they have the talent level, they have the coaching, and they have the ability to slay giants. They just have to put it all together at the same time, which they have done throughout portions of this season. So UCLA could definitely upset UConn in my eyes in that second round, and I could also see a world where UConn walks out of that game with a pretty easy victory over UCLA. So if those two meet up in the second round, it is one that we have circled here at ONIT. Definitely keeping my eyes on how their 2 first-round matchups go. Then in the top half of this East region, we have number 4, Kansas. They draw number 13, Cal Baptist in the first round. If they advance, they would play UConn's nemesis, St. John's, in the second round. It would either be St. John's or Northern Iowa if St. John's gets upset. So Kansas having themselves a very interesting draw. St. John's is definitely a team that I would not want to play. Very good in the Big East this year. They've shown their ability to take down UConn multiple times this season. UConn's one of the best teams in the country as well. So for Kansas, it would be a very difficult matchup. Of course, Northern Iowa, everybody remembers last time that they were in the tournament, the incredible Cinderella run that they went on there for a while. So for Kansas, it's really kind of lesser of two evils. If they get past Cal Baptist, you get either a really good team or you would get a team that just beat a really good team and is hungry for more. So that's how Kansas gets into the second round. If they win both of those games, there's potential that they could match up against Ohio State in the Sweet 16. Ohio State has TCU in the 8-9 matchup. Ohio State getting in thanks to some really good games over the latter half of the season here. Played really tough against ranked opponents, almost upset Michigan in the Big Ten tournament, and finished the year at 21-12. Now they get TCU in this first round. Definitely a winnable game. Ohio State is the 8th seed, so they're technically the favorite. But then in the second round, if they get through the Horned Frogs, they have a very, very tough game against number 1 seed Duke, who will more than likely get through Siena in the first round. So Ohio State would need to pull out all the stops against Duke. I do think they have the ability to beat the Blue Devils, but the Buckeyes would have to play their best game of the season, a game that I don't think they have necessarily played yet. So it is possible, and if they can do that and Kansas can get the job done, then it would be Ohio State meeting Kansas in the Sweet 16, and we'll talk more about the Sweet 16 next week. But for now, we'll move on to the Southern region here and take a look at our two teams that are there. That would be number 4 Nebraska, 26-6, lost to the Big Ten tournament champions Purdue in the Big Ten tournament, but still earned themselves a number 4 seed. Had a great start to the season, were undefeated for a long time until they ran into a juggernaut schedule in Big Ten conference play where they started to slip up, but earning themselves a 4 seed means that they get number 13 Troy in the first round. Pretty good matchup there for Nebraska. Should see them advance easily, but it is March Madness for a reason, right? So you always have to be on the lookout, have to be aware, can't look past anybody. So Nebraska's got to worry about Troy before they start thinking about their second round matchup, which would be against either number 5 Vanderbilt or number 12 McNeese. Those are the two teams Nebraska could play if they win their first round matchup against Troy. Vanderbilt, we just saw go down in the SEC Tournament Championship to an Arkansas team that we'll talk about a little bit later. And then for McNeese, a 12 seed, a little bit easier of a matchup, of course, for Nebraska if you get the 12 seed instead of the 5 seed. But Vanderbilt or McNeese, I think, are both very beatable for this Nebraska team, especially with the way that the Cornhuskers play defense and can just kind of shut teams down. So I would anticipate Nebraska getting to the Sweet 16, but you can never guarantee anything in March Madness. Our other team in this South region is number 10 seed Texas A&M. I didn't think they were going to get in based on their first round loss in the SEC tournament, but they got enough help, and they did enough in the early half of the SEC conference schedule to kind of cement their spot in the tournament according to the committee. They draw the 10 seed straight into the tournament against number 7 seed St. Mary's. So they get a WCC foe. These are always interesting matchups when you have a power conference against a mid-major conference, because St. Mary's certainly hasn't had the same kind of tests throughout the year that Texas A&M has had, playing teams like Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Arkansas, Florida. You know, a bunch of teams who made the tournament. For St. Mary's, their biggest tests on the year in their conference are Gonzaga and Santa Clara, who both made the tournament. But Santa Clara is also a 10 seed. You know, Gonzaga is Gonzaga. They're a different breed, just a completely different animal when it comes to these mid-major teams. Then we'll talk about them later too, because they're in the tournament. But for Texas A&M, this is obviously an opportunity to get a win over St. Mary's, potentially a 10-7 upset spot right here, which would set them up with a very difficult second-round matchup where they're more than likely taking on Houston, one of the best teams in the nation, certainly one of the best teams in this South region. Houston has a matchup with Idaho in the first round that I think they will be able to breeze past. And so Texas A&M, to get into a matchup against Houston, A battle there between two schools from Texas in the second round would be entertaining for sure, but also very difficult for A&M. So we'll see if they can get past St. Mary's and pull that 10-7 upset, and then what happens to them in the second round. They would love to not see Houston on that line in the second round if they do get the win. And like we said before, truly anything could happen, and that's definitely a real possibility that Idaho comes out and pulls an upset over Houston, but it's not likely for Texas A&M. So they're going to have to find a way to get past Houston if they want to go to the Sweet 16 and inevitably reach the Elite Eight if they want to match up with Nebraska potentially. So a lot to be done there in the South region for both of our teams. I think as we flip on over to the next region, which is the West, we have plenty of ONIT teams in this region. We have 3 who are in and 1 that we'll start with because they are in a play-in game tonight. That is number 11, Texas. They're in the first 4 against 11th seed NC State, with the winner going to play BYU. So Texas has to get through North Carolina State tonight if they want to actually be in the NCAA tournament. I know the first 4 counts. In my eyes, you're not actually into the tournament until you are in the tournament. I don't count the first 4, but that's just my personal bias. So Texas has got to get through this game against NC State. Then they would draw a matchup against number 6 BYU. And if they win that game, they're more than likely matching up against Gonzaga. So Texas has a very tough road to walk here. Play in BYU, and then more than likely Gonzaga to get through the first 3 rounds that they would have to play in. So that is going to be very difficult for a team that went 18-14 so far this season. But maybe they get hot and they get it done. I don't see it being very likely for Texas, but of course we'll see. Mentioned Gonzaga, we'll talk about them now. They're the number 3 seed in the West. Their first round matchup is against Kennesaw State, 30-3 this year, WCC champions. All that good stuff for Gonzaga. The mid-major king. They are the one team consistently in this tournament out of the mid-major. Under Mark Few, they have been a model of consistency. No different this year, and they're back in the tournament. First round against Kennesaw State, they win that. They will get either BYU, North Carolina State, or Texas. So we could potentially have an ONIT versus ONIT matchup there in the second round, like I said. I think no matter who Gonzaga gets in front of them in the second round, though, they are going through. I like this team a lot this year. I know that they are consistently in the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4, you name it. Gonzaga pushes through this tournament like no other. They win games consistently in March. I think a lot of that has to do with Mark Few. Doesn't matter who comes in, who comes out. They always have great players. They always have great coaching. They're well-disciplined. And I think they have a lot of the things that lead to victories in March, and we've seen that year in and year out. So I think Gonzaga is going to the Sweet 16 here no matter who you put in front of them. So that's my piece on Gonzaga. We'll see if it comes true, of course, next Tuesday when we take a look at the Sweet 16 Elite 8 potential matchups. As we look at our number 2 seed here in this region, that is the Purdue Boilermakers, our Big Ten champions. Braden Smith became Superman for this team. Just an unreal performance against Michigan in the championship. 11 assists, no turnovers, 38 minutes on the floor. Purdue was hot at the right time, and they got boosted all the way up. They were probably a 4 seed. Now they are a 2 seed thanks to winning the Big Ten tournament, and they get Queens in the 15-seeded first-round matchup that they will play. So the 2 versus 15 there between Purdue and Queens out of North Carolina. Very interesting game, of course. If Purdue can stay as hot as they were, they may have peaked at the wrong time. That's the one scary thing for Purdue. Or maybe they're peaking at just the right time and they make an incredible run through the NCAA tournament. And this was just kind of the start of the climb, and there's still the mountaintop to reach for Purdue. Or they might have already reached the mountain and it could be the downslide. Either way, we'll see. If they get past Queens, they've got Miami, Florida, or Missouri in the second round. Definitely 2 beatable opponents there for Purdue. So I like their chances of getting to the Sweet 16, where we would more than likely see them matched up against Gonzaga if everything that I've said comes true. But as we know, That's not a guarantee whatsoever. So those are our 3 teams that are in the bottom half of this West bracket. All alone up top is Arkansas as they take on the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors in the 4-13 matchup. Arkansas, SEC champions, 4 seed in March Madness here. Incredible run for them through the SEC tournament. Took care of that plucky upstart Ole Miss team that was looking to potentially shock everyone and win the SEC tournament. With the teams that they were dispatching. They took Arkansas to overtime, but Arkansas got it done, and then they got past Vanderbilt as well. Darius Acuff Jr., who I've talked about plenty of times, SEC tournament MVP, 30 points, 11 assists in the championship game. He's unreal. I would love to see Arkansas make a long run because I don't think enough people have necessarily watched Acuff this season. I know he's been talked about quite a lot by a lot of these big media names, but I don't think a lot of people have really sat down and watched Arkansas basketball that much this year as like a casual fan. So for him to make a run in this tournament, Sweet 16, Elite 8, where he gets plenty of eyes on him, I think people will kind of be shocked. But it's difficult for Arkansas because they will draw Wisconsin or High Point in the second round if they beat Hawaii. Wisconsin, like UCLA, very dangerous team. When Wisconsin shows up to play, I don't think anybody in the country can beat them, much like UCLA, but they don't always show up at their peak performance level. So Arkansas's got to be hoping that they catch Wisconsin on maybe an off night, a down game just a little bit, and Arkansas can advance through to the Sweet 16. But that's how the Razorbacks would get into the Sweet 16. As we move on and take a look at our final region here, this is the Midwest, where we have the number 1 seeded Michigan Wolverines and the number 6 seeded Tennessee Volunteers, both who have the luxury of playing play-in opponents. So Michigan is going to get the winner of the UMBC Howard 16 seed matchup, while Tennessee is going to get the winner of Miami, Ohio SMU first 4 game as the 11 seed. So for Michigan, got the number 1 seed, our only number 1 seed on the men's side, 31-3, did lose in the Big Ten championship game to Purdue, but the body of work over the course of the regular season and reaching the final, enough for them to get that number 1 seed. They should have an easy time going past UMBC or Howard, where they will then match up against either Georgia or St. Louis in the second round. So they'd get the Billikens or the Bulldogs, 2 teams who had really solid seasons. St. Louis, of course, having a great run to start the year, has kind of slowly faded off, but they're still a very dangerous and scrappy team to match up with, especially for Michigan, while they're dealing with a little bit of injury issues. And for Tennessee, as the 6th seed, they are 22-11 this year, getting either Miami of Ohio or SMU. Of course, Miami of Ohio not the MAC champions like everyone thought. They were the regular season champs, were undefeated, but lost in the MAC conference tournament, and so did not receive the automatic qualifier out of that conference. Instead, it went to Akron, and Miami, Ohio got in as a at-large squad, where if they beat SMU, they will play Tennessee. Either way, whether it's SMU or Miami of Ohio, I do like Tennessee here in the first round, where they would go into a matchup against either Virginia or Wright State. Virginia, very good season. Once again, they're towards the top of college basketball, as it seems like they always are here as of late. The Virginia's the 3 seed. That's certainly a very difficult game for Tennessee, especially with some of the wins that Virginia's picked up this season. They would love to see Wright State take down Virginia in the first round, if at all possible. But Tennessee, I think, is going to have some very difficult matchups here to try to get to the Sweet 16, especially if they draw Miami of Ohio, because Miami of Ohio doesn't have to travel far to play that first 4 game against Dayton. So they would have that game as kind of almost a tune-up, basically, and then go into that matchup against Tennessee. You got to play a team that only has 1 loss on the year, and then you got to play Virginia in the second round. So things did not shake out well for the Volunteers. But if they can make it through to the Sweet 16, they will definitely be ready for whatever the rest of March Madness throws at them. So those are our 12 men's teams in the tournament, their first and second round potential matchups. Let's look at the women's side, because we have a lot of number 1 seeds. In fact, we have all 4 of them. Starting off in the women's bracket in Fort Worth Regional number 1, we find the number 1 seed UConn Huskies at 34-0, and the number 3 seed Ohio State Buckeyes at 26-7. UConn has themselves a pretty easy path into the second round. Last time I checked, they were favored by nearly 50 points over UTSA, and they won the Big East Tournament Championship by 40 points against Villanova. This team has been unstoppable all year, 34-0. Azzy Fudd and Sarah Strong are playing some of the best basketball in the nation all season long. And so they should waltz past UTSA and then get into a matchup against Iowa State or Syracuse. I know a lot of folks would love to see Audie Crooks go up against Azzy Fudd and Sarah Strong from UConn. So that is the matchup that most of the country, I think, will be pulling for. And I would definitely be interested to see that matchup between UConn and Iowa State. But I don't think UConn will have any problem with anybody that comes in front of them in these first two rounds. This team is just too well balanced, and I think they're just way too good to be tested by any of the three potential matchups that they will face. So UConn should be in the clear, I think. Similar kind of story for Ohio State. They get number 14 Howard here in the first round, and then go into a matchup against either Notre Dame or Fairfield. Ohio State also a big favorite over Howard. They are projected pretty easily to get into the second round. Could be a very interesting matchup against Notre Dame. You get the Cambridge sisters against Kelsey Hidalgo for Notre Dame. That would be a lot of fun. Great guard play would be on the table in that game. But Notre Dame is definitely a scary 6 seed. That is a team that may be a little bit underseeded. I know they've had their struggles throughout the year, not nearly as good as they have been the past couple of years. But that is a team that, with the talent that they have, if they get right and just kind of click on here in the tournament, they could go on a serious run and a string of upsets. So Ohio State got to get past Howard first, and then you can begin to seriously worry about Notre Dame as long as Fairfield doesn't pull off that upset. And if they do, then Ohio State, I think, would be massive favorites to go all the way to the Elite Eight here in Fort Worth Regional 1. So those are our two teams who made it there into Fort Worth Regional 1. We'll take a look at Sacramento Regional 4 here, sticking on the left side of this bracket. Here we find multiple ONIT teams. Now we have South Carolina and USC, both in this region. South Carolina is the number 1 seed in Sacramento Regional 4. They are 31-3, and they get the winner of a play-in game between Southern University and Samford. So South Carolina gets the opportunity to scout, much like we talked about with UConn. South Carolina is one of the best teams in the country. A 16 seed should not faze them whatsoever. Whoever they match up against, they will be favored by at least double digits, if not 20, 30 points. That is just the talent disparity between the teams that they will play. So they should be moving on to the second round with ease, where they could match up with our other ONIT team in the Sacramento Regional 4, which is number 9 seed USC. I did not think USC was going to get into the tournament just based on the losses that they had this year, but clearly the committee valued the strength of schedule there in the Big Ten. So USC is in as the 9 seed. They're 17-13 on the year, going into a matchup against number 8 Clemson. From what I've seen, USC is actually favored in this game pretty considerably. They do have a ton of talent on that team, even with all the injuries that they've dealt with this year. If they were fully healthy, they could definitely be making a push for a number 1 seed instead of one of our other 4 ONIT teams that got 1 seeds. But as it is, USC is the 9 seed going into this game against number 8 Clemson. If they get through, they will take on South Carolina. And I think for USC, that there would be where the talent disparity because of the injuries would come into play. Again, if you see USC was fully healthy, I do think that they could challenge South Carolina. But I think if it's a second round match between South Carolina and USC, or USC versus USC, as some would say, then the Trojans are going to be in trouble, and I see the Gamecocks advancing there. So that is how Sacramento Regional 4 looks for us in the first 2 rounds as we move on to Sacramento Regional 2, the top right side of this women's bracket, where we find 2 more of our ONIT teams, including the number 1 seed in UCLA and a Nebraska team that shocked me by getting into a play-in game that they are heavy favorites in. We'll start off with number 1 UCLA here. Just one loss on the year. Argument between them and UConn whether or not Big Ten strength of schedule was good enough for UCLA to be the 1 seed over UConn. I do think the committee got it right. You cannot punish UConn for beating teams by 40 and 50 points and being undefeated. It's just unfair. UCLA played a great schedule. They played a lot more stiffer competition than UConn did in the conference schedule. But the way that UConn handled their business, they didn't slip up. They never let anybody really even get close to them. I think it's well-deserved, and UCLA gets the number 2 overall seed in the tournament as the 1 seed. I am totally okay with that. They should blow past the Cal Baptist Lancers. Then in the second round, they'll go into a matchup against Oklahoma State or Princeton. I just don't see any of those teams causing trouble for UCLA at the moment. They've won 20-odd games in a row. They are just firing on all cylinders here. They have an embarrassment of riches. I mean, they've got players coming off the bench who would be star players at some of these other schools in the tournament. So UCLA, in my eyes, is going to breeze their way through into the Sweet 16 here in Sacramento too. And then the other team that made it in this region, number 11, Nebraska. They are in a play-in game against number 11, Richmond. Once again, Nebraska is heavy favorites in this game. They played a Big Ten conference schedule that was very difficult. Richmond, of course, did not. So Nebraska is prepared for games like these. And if they win, they would take on number 6, Baylor. As I said, I'm shocked that Nebraska got in. It was an utter collapse for them at the second half of the season. There's another team, too, that we'll talk about that I couldn't believe got in. Clearly, it's all based on the merit of the actual caliber of opponents that they played. You know, those quad 1, those quad 2 losses, they do start to stack up. They help your net score. But to me, at some point, you have to win some of those games. And I think that for Nebraska, I think the thing that got them in was the win over Washington. Britt Prince's last-second three-pointer. I think if they lose that game, too, I don't know how Nebraska gets in here. They won, I think it was 2 out of their last 12 or 2 out of their last 10. It was a really rough stretch for Nebraska. And that's why they're in the play-in, because we thought they were going to be in the field in mid-season guaranteed. But here they are in the play-in game. Then they would get Baylor. If they win the play-in and beat 6-seeded Baylor, they'll get either number 3 seed Duke or number 14 seed College of Charleston. I think against Duke, it'll be a very tough matchup. This Duke women's team this year has been incredible, and I don't think Nebraska just has the ability to keep up with that team, even with kind of the test that they got throughout the Big Ten schedule this season. So we will see, of course, if they can make it through the play-in game against Richmond and then make it past Baylor. But Nebraska has got to figure their stuff out if they are going to move on in this tournament. And we are going to move on to our final region here. That is Fort Worth Region 3, where we have our final number 1 seed. We are taking a look at the Texas Longhorns. SEC champion Texas is in there as the number 1 seed. They get the winner of Missouri State or Stephen F. Austin as that 6 seed play-in game. So they are just awaiting that. Texas will then either get Oregon or Virginia Tech in the second round if they win their first round matchup, which would shock me if they lose. And then Oregon and Virginia Tech, both teams that had so-so seasons in their respective conferences, in the Big Ten and the ACC. I think Texas can breeze past either of them as the 8 or 9 seed that they match up against and be right on into the Sweet 16. And we'll most likely be talking about them more come next week as we look ahead to their potential numbered matchups there in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. The other 2 teams that we have in this bracket are right next to one another and will play in the second round if they both win. We'll start off with number 2, Michigan here. Great season from the Wolverines there, 25-6. They get a 15-seed Holy Cross matchup to start off their tournament. I know the Big Ten tournament didn't go how Michigan wanted it to, did not reach the final, but they still have the opportunity here to make a nice little run in Fort Worth Region 3. I think they have some very easy matchups ahead of them as the 2 seed, which I like for the Wolverines. And Olivia Olson is one of my favorite players on the women's side. She just gets buckets in so many different ways. I really enjoy watching her play and her ability to lead out there on the basketball court, even when she's not maybe the primary assister, but she just takes command on the court through her scoring. And so she's a fun one to watch. I'd like to see Michigan go on a run because of that. And to do so, in the second round, they may have to get through our number 10 seed, Tennessee, who draws a matchup against number 7, North Carolina State. This was the other team, like I said, with Nebraska. This was the team that shocked me that they were in the tournament. Recently I have heard some talk about Tennessee and how they were always going to be in the tournament. The question was, what seed were they going to be? Clearly, the front half of their SEC conference schedule did some heavy lifting because they were horrific to end this season. I mean, they were just, other than the game against Texas, they were not close in a lot of these games. It was just, I mean, I can't believe it. As you can tell, I'm flabbergasted. But they took down number 21 Alabama and number 11 Kentucky back in the middle of January. Tennessee did not get a win over an SEC team that finished with a conference record of 500 or better, or nobody. They didn't beat anybody who won more than half of their SEC games. To end the season, they won 2 out of their final 13 games. So they went 2-11 down the stretch with losses to Mississippi State, lost by 30 to UConn. They barely beat Georgia in overtime, lost by 40 to South Carolina, blew out Missouri, which was like a free win, lost to Texas, lost to Ole Miss, lost to Texas A&M, lost to Oklahoma, lost to LSU, lost to Vanderbilt, lost to Alabama in the first round of the SEC tournament. I'm sorry, I don't know how this team got in. Like I said, it's clearly some heavy lifting. They were blown out by Louisville by 40 points. They were blown out by UCLA by 30 points. They played North Carolina State to open their season. The very first game of the year for Tennessee was against North Carolina State. They lost that game 80-77. Tennessee was obviously in a lot better place at that time. Their non-conference wins are mostly against stragglers from lower conferences here. Again, I just can't believe that Tennessee got in based on this resume. I know quad 1 and quad 2 losses matter to the committee. Like I said, at some point you have to actually win basketball games, and Tennessee did not do that down the latter half of this season. They're 16-13 on the year, and I can't believe that they're in this tournament as a 10 seed. To me, they should be in a play-in game. Them and Nebraska both, if they're going to make the tournament, they should both be in a play-in game. But here we are, and they are the last team on the women's side for us. So that's how our women's bracket looks. We will take a look next week at how everybody got through the second round. I will take a look at those Sweet 16 and Elite 8 previews. That's coming up next Tuesday. We'll be reacting to all the wins and losses for our teams here on YouTube through YouTube Shorts. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're pulling any awesome ONIT cards, you can share them with us. Use the link down below and submit your hits to us. Hope you enjoyed this full bracket breakdown here today. Had a lot of fun bringing it to you. March is one of my favorite times of the year, and this tournament on the men's and women's side will be electric. So can't wait to get more into it. It starts tonight with that first play-in game, so check out number 11 Texas at 9:15 Eastern time, and we'll see you back here with a YouTube Shorts reaction to the result of that game and more previews next Tuesday. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great day, and happy ripping.